Our next session. Today we have a very respected elderly and senior-most faculty with us for our next presentation. It is the stalwart in veterinary medicine, Professor Dr. J.P. Varshney sir. I will have the brief introduction of respected sir. Dr. Varshney sir is the former principal scientist, Division of Medicine, IVRI, and senior consultant at Nandini Veterinary Hospital, which is running at Surat, Gujarat. And as far as the various modalities of the experience specialization is concerned, respected Varshney sir is having the vast experience of more than 40 years, and his specialization deals with the cardiology, particularly the canine internal medicine, canine tick-borne diseases, exotic pet medicine, dietary disorders of ruminants. Apart from this, homeopathy in veterinary medicine and equine medicine. So such is the vast area of specialization is having with the Dr. Varshney sir. About more than 390 publications are at credit of Dr. Varshney sir. Published those research articles in national and international journals, various bulletins and books also. Dr. Varshney sir has been awarded with the various excellent awards. To brief you with few: Award of Merit in 2001, Award of Honor in 2002, then Best Teacher Award at IVRI Izzatnagar, also the Pet Care Award for Canine Excellence. And apart from this, he has received Dr. C.M. Singh Memorial Lifetime Achievement Award. And beyond this, he is having more than 30 awards at his credit. So such is the vast awarding credibility goes to Professor Varshney sir. As far as the important achievements are concerned, sir has published around about 5 books, important books. To name a few, he has published Equine Parasitic Diseases, then the research finding homeopathic bioefficacy, and another book that is Electrocardiography in Veterinary Medicine, which has been recently published in 2020. Also, sir has published a Handbook of Exotic Pet Medicine in 2021, and the another book which is under publication, that is the Application of Ultrasound in Veterinary Medicine. So, Professor Dr. Varshney sir, really a very great scientist, is with us for delivering a lecture on an update on tick-borne infection in canines. So I welcome Professor Dr. J.P. Varshney sir from from PGIVS Akola and the Maharashtra Animal and Fisheries Sciences University. So welcome, sir. Welcome to our today's session.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pajai, sir.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pajai. Should I share the screen?
Yes, sir. You can share the screen. I also welcome our respected Professor Dr. A.U. Bikani, sir, Offset D, PGIVS Akola. Thank you, sir. Varshney sir, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, able to share the screen?
Yes, sir. It is being shared.
Is it okay?
No, sir. Make it full screen. I think it is having the.
It is.
It has become full screen or not? Still not?
Not yet.
What to do then?
So you, sir, there is one image, cup-like image below.
Yes.
That is slideshow image. You just, yes.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Yes. Now it is visible, sir. Now it is visible. Okay, sir.
Should I start now?
Yes.
Sir.
Yes. Thank you very much. At the outset, I would like to thank the authorities of Akola PG College for inviting me to give a lecture on tick-borne infections. As you know, tick-borne infections are very important in canine medicines. If you see any dog, there is possibly there is no dog who has not experienced the tick infestation in their lifetime. Before I come to the tick-borne diseases, their diagnostics and their management, I would like to have a quick look at the ticks. Why the ticks are so obnoxious and they are not desired at all. What harm they can do to the canines. The first you see, they are the very common sight. See any dog, you will find a few ticks or maybe multiple ticks. The number may vary, but mostly the dogs, particularly the community dogs, they do have a tick infestation. The problem of tick infestation has increased during last 10 to 15 diseases because there is a climatic change and humidity has increased, temperature has increased, there is a global warming. So now the ticks are proliferating round the year. Previously, it was thought that the tick-borne diseases are the problem of tropical countries where the climate. Now you see the cases of tick-borne diseases are occurring even in the colder climates. This is because of a climatic change. The ticks are now proliferating round the year and they are acclimatized to the even the colder region where the temperature has also increased, causing increase in this incidence of disease. Previously, it was thought that the tick-borne diseases have a season because tick proliferation has a season. Moist, humid climate is more compatible for them to proliferate. 12 months you on the host and even you find them even in the colder months also. So there is no particular season for the infestation. They are the threat to both animals as well as the human population because they are the vector for many soft ticks, and they are both blood sucking. We have to see why the ticks are so obnoxious. Here, it will ingest about ingested by a tick. And there is a transmission, vertical as well as horizontal transmission of the pathogens. Suppose tick is infested with Babesia, or can transmit that infection to their offspring as well as to the other animals by biting. So both horizontal and vertical transmission is there. You will surprised to know that a single tick can subsequently, if bite for 30 to 30 animals, it can transmit the disease. On the contrary, it is not necessary that all tick bites are associated with a disease transmission. So these ticks are very important as far as the vector of the disease is concerned. If you see all dogs, they have a variety of symptoms with infestation of the ticks. So these symptoms vary from a no apparent illness to anorexia to shock, coma, paralysis, hypothermia, icterus, seizure, anemia, diarrhea, and whatnot. These are not very specific symptoms. These all symptoms are seen not only in tick-borne infection, but in other diseases also. So this increases the complexity in diagnosing the tick-borne diseases. Now see the major diseases which are transmitted by the ticks in the dog host are ehrlichiosis, babesiosis, hepatogenosis, hemobardenosis, tick paralysis, Lyme disease, anaplasmosis, and Rocky Mountain fever. These are the major diseases which ticks can transmit to dogs. Now we take some important diseases like ehrlichiosis. You see on the top slide, it is in Ehrlichia, his modula is marked. This ehrlichiosis is a rickettsial or a bacterial disease, and it is caused by the many species of Ehrlichia which are transmitted through ticks, and broadly they are characterized by inconsistent symptoms. They are vague clinical signs, and this is well documented in India. This ehrlichiosis is seen from even in south, in eastern part of the country, northern part of the country, central part of the country, in the western part of the country. I don't think there is any state which is left where their ehrlichiosis cases have not been reported. The complexity of ehrlichiosis diagnosis is that they have the ability to mimic many other diseases, and there is a multi-systemic and devastating effect of ehrlichiosis. The ehrlichiosis in canines is a potentially fatal and enigmatic disease. It means if it is left untreated, the dog may collapse, and the symptom disease is unpredictable. What turn it will take, it cannot be predicted. It may affect not only the any particular system, it may affect even spleen, liver, kidney, even heart, even gastrointestinal system. All systems may be affected, even joints may be affected in ehrlichiosis. And the affected dog, if even after treatment, it can serve as a reservoir host. The problem with diagnosis of ehrlichiosis in field cases is because the symptoms is very non-specific, and there is a species variation, and in most of the cases, Ehrlichia cases are not single pathogen. They may be associated with co or concurrent infections. Now, there is to show some clinical variant. You can have a look that all these symptoms can be seen in cases of ehrlichiosis. There is epistasis. It may be unilateral or it may be bilateral. There may be cutaneous hemorrhages, ecchymosis, and there may be buccal cavity hemorrhages. Then it can affect the 12th cranial nerve. Deficit will be there, where the tongue may protrude to one side. There can be enlargement of the lymph nodes, and there is a head tilt. The head may be tilted to left side or right side. In some cases, polyarthritis may be there. So all joints may be swollen. There may be eye affections, there will be uveitis, and hind limb edema or body edema may be there in these cases. So it is difficult because of such a wide variety of manifestation. The diagnosis of ehrlichiosis in most of the cases is difficult. So we have to go systematically to adopt the diagnostic technique for the diagnosis of ehrlichiosis. There are the 6-7 steps is to be taken, right from history, clinical symptoms, and blood smear examination, serological test, ELISA, Western blotting, and in vitro culture. These are all techniques are employed for the diagnosis of ehrlichiosis. Now we see the history. History is not unique only. They can suggest you that there is a tick infestation, or there may be the unexplained weakness. The dog is feeling weakness. There may be tendency for hemorrhage. maybe nasal bleeding, maybe petechial hemorrhages, or temperature may or may not be there. Animal may lose weight, or there is a sudden epistaxis or appetite erratic. So such type of history the owner may provide you. If such type of history is there, we can have a suspicion that it could also be a ehrlichiosis. Then symptomology. Symptomology is very wide, right from simple anorexia or no symptoms to death. All can occur in different percentages. So this poses a difficulty if there is no only specific sign that except that hemorrhages and other things, then diagnosis of ehrlichiosis becomes difficult. So then how to proceed further? You can find the symptoms like in gastrointestinal signs will be there, temperature may vary, may not vary, blood, there may be weight loss or weakness, there may be melena, there may be arrhythmia, there may be respiratory signs, and there may be hemorrhages, there may be pale mucosa. And here it is one thing is clear, the anemia caused by ehrlichiosis is far less than the anemia caused by babesiosis. So in these ehrlichiosis cases, there may be changes in the eye also, there may be abdominal distension, there may be ascites, there may be hind limb edema. Splenomegaly is also conspicuous, that is also a sign. Musculoskeletal signs are also there. Actually, these signs depend on the type of infestation, which type of Ehrlichia is there. So how to go further? When you find such a suspicious sign, the simplest way is to go for blood smear cytology. Blood smear cytology, when they give a positive result, it is specific. So it is easy, but problem is with blood smear cytology is that in cases where leukopenia is there or monocyte has declined, you cannot detect the Ehrlichia. So this is a canine monocytic ehrlichiosis where the Ehrlichia morula is found in the monocyte. So if number of monocyte has gone down, number of even total blood count has gone, leukocyte count has gone down, so you may not get Ehrlichia. And when you get it, then it is positive. You can get the Ehrlichia in the monocyte. When you get in monocyte, it is the monocytic ehrlichiosis. When you get in leukocyte, this neutrophils, or then it is a Chafensis, or it is a neutrophilic ehrlichiosis. But another thing is, studies have shown that only 4 to 8% dogs shows Ehrlichia in monocytes. So their number of the in the slide through number of positive cases through the normal blood slide is less, and so it is better to go for the other techniques of that is known as Buffy coat examination technique. This is more rewarding. We can collect the blood, the centrifuge, take the Buffy coat, prepare the slide, stain with Giemsa, and then we can detect the Ehrlichia. Then other third site from where the cytology can be made, that is a lymph node or bone marrow cytology. This is a most rewarding. So in such cases, if you suspect and you do not find in blood smear or Buffy coat, then we go for lymph node or bone marrow. This is, you can see the figures of Ehrlichia. This is Ehrlichia canis. It is in the monocyte. Ehrlichia evengi. This is here. It is in a neutrophil, and this is a Ehrlichia platis. This is now known as Anaplasma platis, or this is found in the platelets. So these three types are canis, evengi, and platelets are very common. And it has all the three has been reported from in the different part of the country in India. Now, we can differentiate the Ehrlichia on the basis of 16S rRNA gene sequence. On the basis of this gene sequencing, the Ehrlichia can be divided into 3 categories: group 1, group 2, group 3. Group 1 has a equi and phagocytophila and human granulocytic Ehrlichia. The most common Ehrlichia which is found in the dog, Ehrlichia and Ewingai, falls under the group 2, and in third it is Rickettsia, Aplatus, and Senatusi. These they fall under group 3. Now the other test, advancement which has been made in the diagnosis of Ehrlichiosis, because the blood smear, so, in blood you can detect only 4 to 5% cases only, 5% positive cases. So the other tests have been developed, that is a patient side assay, that is 3DX or 4DX SNAP test, where the positive indicate the presence of Ehrlichia antibody. Here the difficulty may be whether these antibodies are old or new. It is difficult to ascertain whether the case is suffering from Ehrlichiosis or has recovered from Ehrlichiosis. This will be difficult. Then other test which can diagnose the cases of Ehrlichiosis is indirect fluorescent antibody test, IFTA, where the titer more than 40 is considered positive. And we can also go for plate agglutination test. Even now, ELISA dot blot is also can be used in clinics. This is most handy. It can be used in clinics. Other serological test is antigenic protein RMAP2. This Ehrlichia can be identified. This is a recombinant test antigen for Ehrlichiosis. So these serological tests can be employed for the diagnosis of Ehrlichiosis. Other test is a Western blotting, immunoblotting. This is a quite specific. We can go for nested PCR for DNA amplification. This is highly sensitive. It can target the array genes 16S, rRNA, or P30 genes are identified. And the negative results of the PCR or blood smear does not rule out the possibility of infection. Then highly specific test is a cell culture. If we are not able to detect and we want to confirm further, then we can go for cell culture. They are highly sensitive and moderately specific for even an early diagnosis. And this test should be reserved for the failure cases where we are not able to detect by all other tests. In endemic areas, the serology is diagnostically misleading. As I told you, then they cannot detect the current infection or past infection. They cannot differentiate whether the antibodies are due to the recent infection or old infection. So these are the diagnostic tests which can be conducted for them. Now we come to the treatment. The treatment of Ehrlichiosis is straightforward. We have a drugs which are effective, highly effective. The tetrachloride tetracycline group. Tetracycline can be used at the rate of 6.6 mg per kg body weight, and this results in interruption of the transmission of Ehrlichia. Then some in the earlier literature it was shown that enrofloxacin also acts to some extent, but the results are very controversial, and it should not be actually used for Ehrlichiosis. Now doxycycline is available. It is highly effective. There are 2 doses of it. One is 5 mg per kg BID. It can be used for 14 to 21 days. Generally, it is used for 14 days. But the problem with doxycycline is that it does not clear the immunological clearance is not there. The test will show the positivity even after treatment. Clinical recovery there will be there. Another dose rate that we can straightforward go for 10 mg per kg OD instead of 5 mg per kg BID. But administration of these doxycycline in cases which have a gastrointestinal symptoms becomes difficult because of the vomiting or diarrhea. Then in such cases, doxycycline can be used IV. It is available, and the most effective drug which takes care of the early cases is a imidacloprid. Imidacloprid can be used at the dose rate of 5.5 mg per kg body weight, and it can be repeated after 14 days. You must have been seeing that the cases which are treated with either imidacloprid or even with the doxycycline, they do persist, temperature does persist in them for some time. In such cases, we can resort to metronidazole 15 mg per kg IV TID, or orally it can be given for orally it can be given for the cases where the temperature persisting despite the doxycycline and imidacloprid. Then in literature it has been shown that rifampin has also shown some effect, but it is of not routine clinical use. This is related some research work also. This is as far as concerned with the chemotherapy with early cases. As I told you, when early PI is there, it is multisystemic disease and enigmatic disease when we do not know the prognosis or pathogenesis of the disease. You require many other supportive things or symptomatic therapy. The symptomatic therapy like blood, fluid therapy, vitamin and mineral therapy. As there is a hypertension, there is anemia, or there is deficiencies, then you require the support of these things. And there are other symptomatic therapies that some may have vomiting. Vomiting is to be addressed with antiemetics, H2 blockers, and most important is the control of hemorrhagic diathesis. There you require a separate therapy. Now, control of epistaxis. Dr. Previous speaker has dealt this topic in details. What we can use the intranasal epinephrine. We can use them. Even vincristine can be used because to increase the platelet counts. I think vincristine will be a better choice to control the epistaxis with epinephrine intranasal application. Another thing you find in such cases is a loss of appetite and anorexia. Anorexia does not resolve even with it for few days. In such cases, we can use the appetite stimulants like diazepam. It can be used orally 5 to 10 mg POBID. Then other thing was the anemia management. The anemia in early cases is due to the bone marrow depression. So for such cases management, we can use the recombinant human granulocyte colony stimulating factor. Filgrastim is available in India, which can be used at the dose rate of 5 microgram per kg subcutaneously for 7 days. And another thing which can be used is a recombinant human erythropoietin, that is 50 to 100 units per kg subcutaneously. It can be given 3 times in a week. And other things to stimulate the bone marrow can be stenazole and oxymethylone. And besides this, we can use the decadue, non-androlone. The non-androlone, stenazole, and oxymethylone, they are the appetite stimulating steroid. So they have a supportive role to stimulate the bone marrow. And thrombocytopenia management can be done with the prednisolone given at the dose rate of 1.1 mg BID or vincristine, which can be given at the dose rate of 0.01 mg per kg IV weekly. In this way, we can manage the thrombocytopenia, or we can transfuse the thrombocyte. Now coming to the second important disease of canines, which is transmitted by ticks. This is also hemoprotogen disease. Here, the first slide, you can see the pear-shaped Babesia. This is Babesia canis, and it is caused by the species of Babesiosis is caused by the species of Babesia, which is transmitted through ticks. And here the symptom is again vague, inconsistent, and multi-system. The disease Babesiosis, as we know, is also well documented throughout the country in all the states, but there is a difference in the distribution of the organism. In some species, some of these states, the large Babesia is most predominant, like Babesia canis. In some states, Babesia gibsoni is more prevalent. And it is actually a life-threatening disease because of hemolytic anemia and MODs. The important thing in Babesia, which is to be taken care of, is the MOD and SIDS, systemic inflammatory response syndrome, and multi-organ dysfunction. These symptoms are to be taken care while we are managing the cases of Babesiosis. Then diagnosis in the field cases is difficult because of detection of small Babesia. Babesia canis can be easily detected, while Babesia gibsoni or small Babesia is difficult to manage. Then advancement in diagnostics is there. Then you can even detect these species of Babesia. We can use the RFLP and PCR for the identification of the Babesia species. The Babesia canis or large Babesia is a paired pyriform and with a size of 5 into 2.2 to 3 micron. The large Babesias are Babesia canis canis, Babesia canis bogali, Babesia canis royal. In our country, we have Babesia canis canis. And second small Babesia is a Babesia gibsoni. It is a polymorphic. Its shape varies right from a single dot. It may be singular, it may be comma shape, it may be signet ring shape, and its size is 1.92 into 1.2 micron. The other small Babesia are Babesia microti and Babesia N. So in our country, we have Babesia canis canis and Babesia gibsoni. They are most prevalent in. Now, when you see them, as a disease, Babesiosis as a disease. Babesiosis as a disease occurs in four forms: hyperacute, acute, and subacute, and chronic form. The most important part with the hyperactivity, it is very, very fatal, and this is most predominant or most commonly seen in pups or recently born pups. When pups they do suffer with Babesiosis, the symptoms are unpredictable and variable. They are shock and hypotensive shock. Sorry, here it is not hypertensive, it is hypotensive shock. This is most important thing. And coma and death. The pups may show simple symptoms like anorexia, maybe hypoxia, there may petechiae may be there, maybe letharginess, some may show hematuria, ecchymosis may be there, and there may be extensive tissue damage, and there may be coagulopathy. Because of coagulopathy, hypotensive shock, and hypoxia and petechiae, it makes the prognosis very grave in pups. Then in the second form, the acute form, where the anemia is most prevalent, hemolytic anemia is most prevalent, and this anemia is more severe as compared to ehrlichiosis. Here you can see the inactive phase. There may be splenomegaly. There may be gastrointestinal symptoms like vomiting. There may be hematuria. Hematuria is not consistent. Hematuria is most commonly seen with Babesia canis. In cases of Babesia gibsoni, there is no hematuria. Lymphadenopathy is prevalent, and pyrexia. Pyrexia is also inconsistent in cases of Babesia gibsoni. In many cases of Babesia gibsoni, you may not find temperature increased, but temperature decreased may be there. Thrombocytopenia is there, and lethargy is there, and icterius. Icterius is most common in cases of Babesia canis. And in few cases, there may be periorbital edema also. Then in the chronic form, there may be intermittent fever, body loss, there may be dyspnea, arthritis, and muscular masticatory myopathy. Then mandibular muscles or face muscles myopathy may be there, so there may be difficult in eating and chewing. Ascites may be there, ulcerative stomatitis is there, and cerebral ataxia may be there. So these are the symptoms make the disease more complicated. I show you some of the clinical picture of the clinical variant. The anemia and weight loss in first figure, dullness and depression, and CNS sign in third. CNS sign, and then dullness and lymphadenopathy is quite common in some cases. There may be pale conjunctiva with petechiae. There may be ectatic body, and hind limb ataxia may be there. Conjunctiva may be pale because of anemia, and then there may be backache, arthritis. And in some cases, you can find ascites also. In the respiratory signs are also there. Pneumonic signs may be there. And there may be increased salivation, and there may be gait deficit, there may be gasping and death. So there is a wide variety of symptoms because of a multi-systemic involvement. So it is symptoms-based basis. It is very difficult to see that this is a case of babesiosis. The purpose of giving all these signs is that even in some different type of these symptoms, the babesiosis can be there. So in your differential diagnosis, the babesiosis should not be ignored. Then we should go for the testing for babesiosis. Here, there is a hepatomegaly and splenomegaly. This is also very predominant in cases of babesiosis. In cases of ehrlichiosis, the splenomegaly is most prevalent. Nowadays, the evidence is growing that there is a cardiomyopathy, heart failure also in cases of babesiosis. Recent studies have shown there is an increased cardiac troponin I concentration in cases of many babesiosis cases, indicating that cardiac myopathy is there, and even the arrhythmia is there. And then this shows the splenomegaly, ultrasound picture of the splenomegaly. Spleen is very enlarged, and liver may be hypoecho, showing that there is a hepatosis also in cases of babesiosis. So this is to give you a picture that there are multi-systemic effects of the babesiosis. Now, just to summarize that multi-systemic effect may be from blood, CNS, there may be anemia, hemolytic, thrombocytopenia, reticulocytosis, carboxyhemoglobinemia, cerebral ataxia, rheumatic myalgia, muscular convulsions may be here, and there may be paraplegia. Then metabolism and spleen may be affected. There may be acidosis, metabolic acidosis, shock may be there, hypokalemia there, hypoglycemia there, hyperlactatemia there, and hyperpyruvatinemia is there. Then hypocapnia, hypoalbuminemia, hyperchlorinemia, and lowered plasma bicarbonate consumption. And then red pulparia is increased, reticuloendothelial hyperplasia there, splenomegaly is there. The purpose of talking these things, we should keep these things in the mind so that we can manage these cases by giving the supportive therapies. Now, the other thing which is the other organ which is compromised is the liver, where you can find the centronuclear degeneration or necrosis of the liver, and then bilirubin stasis is there because of hemolysis. This leads to jaundice. In these cases, the enzymes like SAP, AST, and ALP is also increased. There is a acute hepatitis, as has been indicated by ultrasound figure also. And in some cases, this hepatopathy or acute hepatitis may be associated with hepatomegaly, and there may not be hepatomegaly also. Then musculoskeletal system, there is joint swelling, back pain, and rhabdomyolysis, muscular pain, and the myoglobin level may be increased, and odema is there, hind moving. And cardiovascular system, as I showed you some picture of the dog, that there is a compromise. And there is an increased cardiac troponin, especially cardiac troponin I. There myocardial injury, myocarditis, and this. How this is happening? This is happening because of the ischemia or because of myocardial ischemia. Myocardial ischemia due to hypoxia and deficiency of the hemoglobin, lower hemoglobin. So transfer of the oxygen is affected. So they may lead to myocardial changes. And in some cases, the hemorrhage, necrosis, inflammation, and fibrin. Fibrin, they produce the microthrombi in the myocardium. They may be cause of the cardiovascular system affection. And in long-standing cases or cases which are having a myocardial compromisation, they may show the left ventricular failure, hypotension, and disseminated intravascular coagulation. The purpose of this talking about the cardiovascular system of babesiosis is that while we are managing the cases of the babesiosis, we should look for blood pressure. We should look for coagulative disseminated intravascular coagulation, different hemorrhages, and microthrombi formation, and myocardial injury. Then even thyroid is affected. The euthyroidism is reported. There is low level of the T4 and T3 due to Babesia gibsoni infection, and it is a pseudo hypothyroid. In babesiosis cases, there may be acute pancreatitis also with the elevation of serum amylase or lipase activity. So the cases which do not respond even after giving the specific chemotherapy should be looked for multiple organ dysfunctions should be evaluated. And then immune system is also compromised. There is the immune suppression, there is the depression of lymphocyte blastogenesis and anti-parasitic antibody production. And most important cases which causes the mortality in cases of babesiosis despite treatment is systemic inflammatory response syndrome. So when there are changes in leukocyte, there is a change in the temperature. So there is, if any indication of inflammatory response or there is a increase in chronic reactive protein, we should manage these syndrome. Systemic inflammatory response syndrome is to be managed. Then coagulation defects is there. Then even eye change. Even in some cases, there is a conjunctivitis, keratitis, keratoconjunctivitis, there is retinal hemorrhages which can lead to blindness, and there is a severe cases may have a retinal detachment. Corneal opacity can also be seen in cases of babesiosis, even in cases of ehrlichiosis also. Now, recently, this skin symptoms have also been found associated, and it is very difficult to say that pyoderma, erythemia, pododermatitis, edema, and skin hemorrhages are due to the babesiosis. But these symptoms can be proliferated or can be seen in cases of babesiosis. Now, respiratory syndrome, the acute respiratory distress is there. This is because of the anemia, anemic anoxia. There may be pulmonary edema because of lower proteins, or the pulmonary edema may be due to left ventricular failure also. There is a shock because in the pulmonary form of the babesiosis, and they all lead to dyspnea. Then lymphatic system, lymphadenopathy is there. And then oxidative stress is also there. Their lipid peroxidation and nitric oxide metabolites are changed. So there is a oxidative stress. So these all things will help us to manage the cases of babesiosis. Now, diagnostic technique, as with all, there may be history of tick infestation, there are varied clinical symptoms, and then cytology, blood smear cytology. But it is not always conclusive because large Babesia can be easily detected. While detecting Babesia gibsoni, there may be many times there may be confusion and sometimes may be omitted. So we can go for even serological tests, and we can go for other diagnostic tests like fluorescent antibody test, ELISA, and PCR. History, just common, and symptomology has been discussed earlier. So this is, so to Babesia, you can see the Babesia in first slide. They are big. They will take a basophilic stain. They are just like dot. Some it may be single, there may be two, or there may be comma shaped, or there may be rod shaped. Here it is Babesia canis, pear shaped in pairs. They will find in pairs. So if the blood cytology is they are simple, it is highly specific, easy to perform, cheap, but false negative are more common in chronic cases because detection is difficult. Detection of Babesia gibsoni requires practice and expertise. So then serological test, we can go for IFTA, the titer more than 40 is positive. We can go for ELISA, which is highly sensitive but moderately specific. And we can go for molecular based tests like ELISA and PCR using the P18 and TREP PCR, RFLP, nested PCR, and we can flow cytometry. We can go for all these tests to confirm. Coming to the treatment of babesiosis is again a little bit tricky. It is not straightforward, though there are drugs, babecidal drugs are available like imidacloprid. We have a dimnazine acetate. Both drugs are available. They are babecidal. They are very specific. The imidacloprid is safe, quite effective against both Babesia, canis and gibsoni. But side effects like transient salivation, diarrhea, dyspnea, lacrimation, and depression is there, but they usually respond to atropine. They are not serious, so it can be given safe. And then the dose rate for imidacloprid in cases of Babesia is again 5.5 to about 6.2 mg. It can be given and can be repeated after 14 days after. And then another drug most common is dimazine acetate. This is effective against both. It can be repeated or higher doses if it is given, if it is too frequently repeated, because by giving dimnazine acetate, sometimes you do not get desired result. So if you may repeat it. But if you repeat or give a higher dose, there may be damage to the liver, kidney, brain failure, and there may be pain at the injection site, there may be weakness, tremor, polyneuritis, and paralysis. Even paralysis may be seen even at the therapeutic dose level. So dimnazine acetate in many countries is not an approved drug for using in this case. The problem with dimnazine is, another problem is that when there is a already lower hematocrit value, then dimnazine is also causes fall in hematocrit value. So this has to be taken care of that without increasing the hematocrit value or even the blood pressure, if we use the dimenagine, it may cause the further blood pressure and cardiovascular compromise. So there may be catastrophic results also by using dimenagine. Now, other drugs have been reported to having some effect like metronidazole. I think it is not routinely used, but doxycycline has been reported to have some effect, but not much effect on Babesia gibsoni. But it is used for the concurrent infection. That probably there may be a Ehrlichia infection, so people use it, doxycycline also. The other specific drugs which are showing some promise is a clindamycin. Clindamycin has been evaluated at the dose rate of very high dose rate, about 25 mg per kg PO/BID for 14 days, has shown good result, but immunological clearance is not there. Parasitemia will be there, even persistent. Other combination therapy which has been proved much effective and that can eliminate Babesia gibsoni is a combination of azithromycin. It can be given at the dose rate of 10 mg per kg orally, plus atovaquone, that is 13.3 mg per kg PO/TID. It is for 10 days has to be given. This has shown elimination of Babesia gibsoni. Then some alternate drugs have also been tried, like homeopathic drugs like Protalus horridus 200C and TNT 200C. They have been tried in the cases where the hemoglobin level was more than 9%, not less than 9%. They have shown some effect. Then they have improved the hemoglobin level also, and they can improve the different platelet counts and then reduce the parasitemia in dogs. Some literature reports are available in literature. As I told you that chemotherapy is not the answer, not only the answer for treating the babesiosis. Chemotherapy is specific for Babesia affecting or the Babesia. But as a clinician, we have to manage a total patient in totality. So we require supportive therapy like blood transfusion, fluid transfusion, vitamin and minerals, steroids, hematonics, and bone marrow stimulant. Here again, appetite stimulation can be done through giving diazepam, and thrombocytopenia can be managed with a prednisolone, dexamethasone, vincristine. For management of anemia, recombinant human granulocytic factors can be given, and hemorrhagic management requires the blood transfusion of the fresh blood or platelet-rich plasma. They can be used. Now, prevention and control. Prevention of control for babesiosis is a control of the tick vector. And then we have to have a screening of the donors for babesiosis and ehrlichiosis. And in literature, reference has been given that there is a use of soluble parasitic antigen as a vaccine, but it is not common. Now, other important disease which is important in dogs, which is transmitted through ticks, is a hepatogenosis. There are two types of hepatogen organisms. One is Canis, other is Americanus. In India, Canis has been reported in many states of the country. This disease is transmitted through ingestion of the infected ticks, and there is an intermittent fever in this, and there is a emaciation. Then hyperesthesia, specifically in lumbar region, cervical and trunk rigidity, lumbar pain is there, and normal appetite until near death. There is no issue. And this disease is due to the not tick bite. It is due to the ingestion of the infested tick. So it is through the ingestion of the infested tick. Here, diagnosis, there is a gametocyte in peripheral leukocyte. Here in this picture, you can see this is leukocyte. Here, this is a gametocyte of Hepatozoon canis, and IFA and ELISA are the specific tests which can be used. For the treatment, both this Hepatozoon canis and Hepatozoon americanum, they require a different strategy. The Hepatozoon canis can be treated with the use of primaquine at the dose rate of 1 mg per kg, PO that can be given weekly, and doxycycline 10 mg per kg PO OD for 14 days daily. Doxycycline is a daily and primaquine are weekly. And amiodarone can also be tried in this case at the dose rate of 5 mg per kg intramuscular and can be repeated after 14 days. The americanum, the Hepatozoon americanum requires a combination of 4 different drugs and that a long therapy for 14 days. This group 1 drug is a trimethoprim sulfa. It is to be given at 15 mg per kg orally for twice daily. Then clindamycin 10 mg per kg orally is 3 times a day, and pyrimethamine 0.25 mg per kg once only PO. And when these drugs are given, these drugs are followed with a decoquinate, that is decox available. This is 10 to 20 mg per kg. This drug is to be given in the food indefinitely, and sometimes it has been used for 2 years, but this is actually not our problem. This is problem in America. Now, another thing, this is Hemavitonella. Hemavitonella is not common in India, but those few cases have been reported. And this is actually a mycoplasma. This is Mycoplasma caused by Mycoplasma hemocyanis, and this become conspicuous in cases which are immunocompromised or the dogs which have been splenectomized. In these cases, hemobiotonal infection can take place. So there are few rare reports about the zoonotic importance of Mycoplasma haemophilus, that is cat hemobiotonella, not of canine hemobiotonella. These clinical signs are very inapparent in some cases, that they mostly occurs as a co-infection, the anemia is more prevalent, and there is a general sign of illness, many signs as in seen in other diseases. The diagnosis of the hemobiotin in this one, hemobiotinorosis is from the blood smear. Organism is seen in, the problem with blood smear is this hemobiotonella, this mycoplasma is a cyclic in blood. Sometimes it is in the blood, sometimes it is not in the blood. So many times the reports are negative, and despite having a mycoplasma infection. So this is the figure cytologically, which can you send it in a chain shape, or it may be an individual. This is seen in a RBC. This may be in a rod shape, it may be a ring shape, or it may be single, or it may be in chains. And other Coombs test and PCR can be done to confirm the cases of mycoplasma. Then drug and treatment consists of oxytetracycline, which can be given at the dose rate of 40 mg per kg. It is to be given intravenously. It is to be given slow and twice daily, and till the oral intake takes place. When the oral intake takes place, then we can switch to doxy 10 mg per kg body weight PO. It can be given even BID at 10 mg, and it's a higher dose rate required. And enrofloxacin has been reported as another antibiotic which can act against the mycoplasma. Then together with them, the prednisolone can also be used at 1 mg per kg PO BID for 14 days for the management of that. Then another is borreliasis, which is a Lyme disease. This is Borrelia, it is a spirochete. This is not common in dogs in India. it is transmitted by black ticks, that is deer ticks. In my clinical manifestation is of musculoskeletal system, anorexia and fever is there. Is detection of Lyme disease is by detection of antibody against C6 protein. Here in this case, the doxycycline for 4 weeks is a treatment. Now, the major thing, as we all know, that we are treating the ehrlichiosis and babesiosis despite having the chemotherapeutic drugs. Why there is a treatment failure? Why the result is not 100%, or all the dogs are not survived? The major causes for treatment failure is that we do not have a complete and poor evaluation of the patient. It means that patient has not been evaluated thoroughly for all or multiple organ dysfunction or cysts. Well, these are the two things which decide the response to the treatment. If there is a multiple organ dysfunction and we go for a specific chemotherapy, before stabilizing the body system, the treatment result may not be encouraged. What I mean to say with this is that we should not jump for chemotherapy on the first visit. We have to stabilize the patient first, so that it can, when the patient is stabilized, we can safely go for chemotherapy. Second thing can be there, our diagnosis is wrong. We have not diagnosed properly. There may be something else. And third important thing is this, that it is not necessary when it is Babesia, it is Babesia only. It may have a concurrent infection of Ehrlichia. It may have a concurrent infection of 2 species of Babesia. It may have a concurrent infection of Mycoplasma. It may have a concurrent infection of even Dinosphagia. So when concurrent or co-infections or multiple infection is there, the results are poor. The result to therapy are poor. Then another thing is that we are using many different antibiotics. They may not be specific. The drugs may not be proper, or the doses may not be proper. And when you treat the Babesia canis or Babesia gibsoni, they both require a different dose schedule, because the response to imidocarb or to other drugs, they are little different when the species is different. And then improper selection of those. Then we are not drug. The drug is not selected properly to what drug is to be required. And as discussed earlier, that we have not paid full attention to the functioning of other organs and hemodynamics. And then unrational use of drugs. We are using many drugs without knowing. Even when there is babesiosis, people are using different kind of antibiotics. Like even they are using enrofloxacin, they are using Intacept, ceftriaxone, they are using different antibiotics. Why do you use them? They are not effective. And we have not taken care of MODs and SIRS while treating these cases. These are the to show that with Babesia you can find the even trips. With Babesia, they are the trips. Again here the E. canis is there, Babesia gibsoni is there, Babesia canis is there. Then with Babesia gibsoni, even Dirophilaria is there. Then, as I told you that the multiple organ failure, there is a cardiomyopathy is there, their pericardial effusion is also there in cases of babesiosis. Now, other important disease is the tick paralysis. Tick paralysis is caused by the neurotoxins of the female Ixodes ticks. These are caused by salivary neurotoxins, and this is a light brown to gray tick, 2 to 3 cm size with an orange fold limb. The characterization is the limbs are orange color. There is a symptoms are acute, progressive, symmetrical, and ascending motor paralysis takes place. Here you can see the hind limb paralysis there. Clinical signs of the tick paralysis there may be change in the voice. They may not able to walk. There may be hind limb weakness. There may be salivation. There may be vomiting. There may be wobbliness of the hind limb. There may be panting, moist cough, dyspnea may be there, and animal is not able to stand properly. And other thing is that cold blue tinge gums. Gums becomes the blue and cold, and death may occur in the tick-borne paralysis. Then management, it requires fluid therapy and antibiotics to prevent pneumonia, and atropine to reduce salivation, sedative to reduce excitation, and steroid therapy, and with vitamin B complex, beacon therapy. And most important is the management of the ticks, removal of the ticks, or use of the anti-tick drugs. Now, so the crux of the whole lecture is that tick-borne disease can be easily prevented by having the control over the ticks. The ticks can be controlled by using four different kind of the drugs. One is fluralaner. This is an oral drug. This can be one time when it is given, it can control the ticks for 3 to 4 months. And spot on. There are different spot ons are available, which are used to reduce the tick population, and shampoos are there, and colors are there. If we use them, we can control the ticks. So this is a bird's eye view about the an update over the tick-borne diseases in canines. So thank you very much for the patient hearing. It will be my great pleasure to answer if there are any questions and queries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. There are a few questions in the question answer section box.
Yes.
Shall I read it, sir?
Yes, definitely.
First question is uveitis in Ehrlichia is unilateral or bilateral?
It may be uni and bilateral, both.
Okay, sir. Another question is how much margin of safety of doxycycline in advanced pregnant bitches and queen?
Sorry, I could not follow.
How much margin of safety of doxycycline
Huh.
in advanced pregnant bitches and queen?
There may be problem with the infants, baby, with the doxycycline.
Another question, the participant has asked about the diazepam can enhance appetite. How
Yes.
it can enhance?
Diazepam is the appetite stimulator in canines. It is well documented and reported in literature. Actually, the periactin we are using, peritol drug. This is for a appetite stimulant. It is specific for felines, but it is not active in canines. So this diazepam somehow stimulates the appetite.
Thank you, sir. Another question is from the participant has asked about the we get lameness together with pyrexia in dogs. What is the etiology? It
No,
responds to doxycycline.
Then we should go for the blood smear examination. Look for the granulocytic aldehyde. Granulocytic aldehyde. You may find in neutrophil aldehyde. It may be aldehyde evengi.
Another participant has asked about the dose of Pluralner.
Which one?
That is Pluralner.
Acha, that is those. This tablet is available for 250 mg to 1400 mg. They are oral tablets, and they are up to 4.5 to 10 mg, 10 kilo. This is a 250 mg tablet, and more than 10 to 20, it is a 10 to 20 kg. It is a 500 mg tablet. And then 20 to 40, it is a about 1000 mg, and then more than 40, it is a 1400 mg tablet.
Yes, sir. Another question is, participant has asked about the differential diagnosis with leptospirosis clinically.
Leptospirosis and
Leptospirosis diagnosis, differential diagnosis clinically, how we can differentiate?
in leptospirosis, clinically it is on all cases to confirm whether it is leptospira or other. It is difficult. For that leptospira, we have to go for urine examination for this one, dark field microscopy. So clinically, it is difficult to say that it is lepto.
Yes, sir. Just another question has appeared. Whether the treatment of ehrlichiosis, metronidazole is to be used along with either doxy or imidacloprid or alone.
Metronidazole is to be used when the temperature is persisting, even not resolving within first 4 to 5 days, despite the doxycycline or imidacloprid. Then we can go for additionally for metronidazole.
Yes, sir. All those questions were there. I think no more questions are remaining. If any comes, we will send it to you on your mail address, sir.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now I request our co-coordinator.
Sir, Varshney sir,
Yes.
please stop your sharing, sir, please.
Okay.
Now I request our co-coordinator, Dr. Mahesh Ingole, sir, to offer vote of thanks.
So on behalf of the organizing committee and Postgraduate Institute of Veterinary Animal Sciences, Akola, I am very much thankful to Dr. J.P. Varshney sir, who is a former principal scientist in the Division of Medicine at Ivera Izzatnagar, for his excellent and presentation and covering all aspects of the tick-borne infections in canine. So thank you, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Thank
your sharing valuable experiences
Thank you.
in this area of tick-borne infections in canines. Thanks.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
thank you, sir. Thank you.